and know who you're dealing with. Let the professionals at Security Title work with you to minimize loss due to wire fraud. We are here to help.
Afade, I'm Tony Ada, and I'm running to be your senator in the 36th Guam legislature. We have witnessed firsthand the detrimental effects the pandemic crisis has brought upon our island families. As your senator, I will prioritize economic recovery and resiliency, transparency and accountability in our government, public health and medical services, keeping our neighborhoods and businesses safe. I humbly ask for your vote. I'm number 7 on the Republican side of the ballot, and together we will. I'm Tony Ada, and I approve this message.
A court battle may be brewing in North Carolina over controversial flags flying at a polling place.
The flags fly from the pillars at the entrance to the town hall in Carborough, a community known for its progressive stances just west of Chapel Hill. The town also serves as an early voting site, and the state elections board says they received several complaints about the flags from voters. The board ordered the town to take the flags down, saying they could be interpreted as an official endorsement of a particular movement and could be seen as intimidating. But Carborough Mayor Lydia Lavelle says after consulting with the town attorney, they'll remain up. Tom Rigotti, Fox News.
El Paso County, Texas, ordering all non-essential activities shut down for the next 2 weeks, including in-person dining, gyms, hair and nail salons, and tattoo parlors. Area hospitals in El Paso saying they are being overwhelmed by new coronavirus cases. Talks on another virus relief package look to be stalled again.
Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin says Speaker Pelosi has refused to compromise on pillars of a coronavirus relief measure, including funding for state and local governments and liability protections for businesses. Mnuchin says the administration has offered reasonable compromise positions. His letter is a response to a letter sent by Pelosi accusing the administration of failing to respond to offers on a wide array of coronavirus-related spending, including money for schools and testing. The back and forth is the latest indication negotiations have again hit a wall. Congress has been unable to pass coronavirus relief since the spring. Jared Halpern, Fox News.
On the 45th anniversary of Martha Moxley's murder in Greenwich, Connecticut, a judge will hold a hearing Friday to determine if Michael Skakel should be retried in that killing. A Kennedy cousin, Skakel was convicted of murder in 2002, 25 years after Moxley was found bludgeoned to death and verdict thrown out 11 years later. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Hagåtña and Mezcla Dos Upper Tumon are now open for takeout and delivery services. For more information, call now at 479-2652 or 3 or Mezcla Dos at 646-6295. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro brings you island hospitality with the true taste of modern Chamorro cuisine at the comfort of your own home. They take your local favorite dishes and serve them with extra flair you will only find at Mezcla. Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
Half a day. I'm Will Castro and I'm running for Congress. This general election, I humbly ask for your vote in order that I may continue to build bridges and find solutions so that generations now and generations to come may live here and raise a family of their own, one day on a better Guam. If given the opportunity to serve you in Congress, you can count on me to honor and represent you well. Guahu si William Castro, malalagadzut po Congreso. Zanhua preba, estina mensaje. Bob Pelkey, Treasurer.
Are you fed up with those long bank lines? Do you wish you had a bank who gave you faster service? Well, by enrolling in Bank Pacific's new mobile app, you don't even need to wait in line. But even if you do want to come down in person, we're more than happy to see your smiling face, as long as you have a mask. Because our service is so good, we don't believe in lines. Because for 66 years, we've been making sure you get the service you deserve. Because where others put branches, we place roots. And we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Eivetsem rerivetter COVID-19 retturen irisits ekkio rabukora miats job irisin. Igen mi be fi worunga versawai kose bocher kopon noborong neibum. Inge kai kie gauru kewe sinerevetter kose bocher muttir köri uriget eu rarrob werisuk. Kosabu witira toriom ka semuriro ibe kopok köri ekerier ernisire semmun. Kose bocher siboturu ekkio rabukora mekkio irmia pagapang iri semmun. Ato waware fidong iriakots pore raibe pot noborong neibum ike pure miwe fi opsawai. Muttir nageo tessi COVID-19 ike pure mi churriebe mi semmun. Amuttir ne förie kiernis me pure negoruk pangiri baraban arabas mirisin. Sirisin afito siri Manielu at si office in Micronesian Resource Center, Miek US Taser Siri Joyce Broadcasting. Kiriso Tabur.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Security Title, providing solutions for complex real estate transactions. Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Start the program every day the same way with the respectful reading of the Second Amendment. It's a little more difficult on Friday, which is our least favorite day of the week, because it means this is it for Tall Tales for this week. Jose and I go into purgatory for 2+ days here with no Tall Tales. And we somehow are always able to tough it out and make it through, but it's difficult. But then we're back on Monday, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed with 5 more days of Tall Tales. That's why Monday's our favorite day, and Friday is our unfavorite day. So having done the respectful reading of the Second Amendment, I'm going to once again turn to the jurisprudence of Amy Coney Barrett concerning Second Amendment cases during the time that she was a judge on the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. This case is called the United States versus Uriarte. Judge Barrett dissented from a panel opinion applying First Step Act to a firearm offense. That act clarified that for offenses under 18 U.S.C. Section 9924C, a second or subsequent conviction carrying a mandatory 25-year sentence could only be imposed after the first conviction had become final, not in the same proceeding as the first conviction, as had been the practice for many years under prior Supreme Court precedent. The act applied to anyone for whom a sentence has not been imposed at the time it became law. At issue in this case was whether a defendant who had been sentenced and had his sentence vacated but had not been resentenced could qualify for relief under the act. The majority said yes, in true textualist style. Amy Coney Barrett is a textualist when it comes to interpreting statutes. In short, what a textualist is one who reads the words of the statute and gives them their standard meaning without spending a lot of time going through various kinds of judicial hijinks to attach a different meaning to the statute. So, in true textualist style, Judge Barrett invoked various style manuals and relied on grammatical parsing of the language to conclude that the act did not apply. The defendant had been sentenced initially. A sentence had already been imposed, even though that sentence had been vacated. As she said, a background principle or resort to congressional purpose cannot overcome statutory text. So even if you understand exactly what the legislature thought they were doing at the time they enacted the statute, that understanding does not trump what the statute actually says. So it's a common sense rule, because it's not what the author of the important thing is not what the author of a writing thought it meant. It's what the reader thinks it means, or in this case, the readers. So she says, she said a background principle, for instance, resort to congressional purpose, cannot overcome statutory text. After all, speculating about congressional desires is a dicey enterprise, which is one reason among many that we should stick to the text. That's my kind of judge. As this overview shows, the key gun-related cases in which Judge Barrett has written opinions run the gamut from a prominent Second Amendment dissent to those in a range of criminal law contexts. Given her short tenure on the Seventh Circuit so far, it's probably too soon to conclude that these rulings allow us to distill her theory of firearms law, or even know whether she has a single definable theory yet. But from these cases, it's nonetheless evident that Judge Barrett takes gun rights seriously and recognizes that the ubiquity of firearms in American life requires adjustments to police practices, criminal law procedure doctrine, and substantive criminal law. Okay, well, right on, Justice Amy Coney Barrett. You know, there's so many good reasons to like the fact that Amy Coney Barrett is now on the Supreme Court of the United States, one of which is that she seems to be very smart and very able to handle the job. A second reason is that she's a textualist when it comes to statutory interpretation and an originalist when it comes to constitutional reasons, interpretation. But the third reason, and maybe if not the most important, the most fun, is that her seat on the Supreme Court is driving the left nuts. It doesn't get any better than that. Okay, let's take a look at Zemi Ikotny. So here we go with Daily News. This is from Mark Siegel, MD, a member of the USA Today Board of Contributors, a professor of medicine, and medical director of Doctor Radio at NYU Langone Health. I guess they would rather run something from a doctor at NYU than a local editor at the Daily News in the Daily News editorial boardroom. Well, I guess they don't think that much of us. I'm just going to take a cruise through this until I get tired of it. After September 11, 2001, I joined the multitudes who were afraid to fly. I knew it wasn't rational, that I was statistically much more likely to be in a fatal accident in the 10-hour car rides I took with my young children to visit my in-laws in Detroit. In fact, over 40,000 people died in motor vehicle accidents in the United States in 2001. What we ought to do, Jose, we ought to lock all those people up so that they can't drive. Think of how we could reduce the death rate. Versus 525 deaths on commercial flights in 2001. So 40,000 in car accidents, 525 in commercial flights, including the 9/11 terrorist attacks. But it didn't feel that way. People who were afraid of flying were far more likely to die in the car rides they took instead. Fear ruled in those days, fear of terrorism, and we over-personalized the risk and felt we could be next. Flash forward to 2020, and I am once again afraid to fly, albeit for completely different reasons. Take my trip to see my daughter in Seattle. Well, I'd be afraid to do that. Send me to some safe place like Iraq or Iran or North Korea. Anything would be safer than Seattle and the chase. I was sitting completely separate from others at the front of the plane in business class. Nevertheless, as props against my own fears, I wore my doctor's N95 mask, shield, and gloves. No one looked at me strangely except my wife, who wore a simple surgical mask and clearly thought I was overreacting. In other words, the high-flow filtration systems were extremely effective, much more so than other indoor ventilation found in homes or businesses. Granted, the study, quote, subjects were masked mannequins rather than humans to simulate the risk of transmitting particles on planes, as well as to markers to stimulate the virus. Nonetheless, the results were unexpected and impressive. This study will certainly help to calm fear of flying, though I would still recommend flying only when necessary, staying hydrated, wearing a mask, disinfecting hands and face regularly, and only traveling to and from areas where the virus is not burgeoning. I must confess that in retrospect, I am wondering if my chances of catching Wuhan virus at John F. Kennedy International or SeaTac International weren't in fact greater than on the plane itself, especially when I consider the crowds of people I saw at the coffee stands or riding power walkways. My advice to my patients, keep your distance and wear your mask in the airports too. Fear is not your friend, but caution is. Well, very good, doctor. And then we have the Post editorial. And this is all I'm going to do with the Post editorial. I don't disagree with what they're saying. And I think that that the people who have to be, and I don't like this term, frontliners. You know, frontliners was the term that we were talking about when we wanted to pay everybody double. That was the definition of a frontliner, anybody we wanted to pay double. So I'm not going to spend any time on this editorial at all, except just to read the title. We thank you, frontliners, as you face greater risks. Because the rest of the editorial really doesn't say anything at all. It's just words on paper. You got to do better than that, Guam Daily Post, if you're going to get any more blue stars. And you're up to 226 now, so the Daily News is still stuck at 55. Okay, so that's Demi Cutney for today. And let's take a look at the card. So today I'm inaugurating a new feature on the card at the suggestion of none other than Drive-Through Jack. Let me try that again. Today I'm inaugurating a new feature on the card at the suggestion of none other than Drive-Through Jack. Yeah, that guy. That's Drive-Through. That's Drive-Through Jack's theme song, the Chow Call. So the new feature, as suggested by Drive-Through Jack, I'm going to label the number of days Guam has been held hostage. So today is the 226th day that Guam has been held hostage since March 14 of this year. 226 days. So thank you, Drive-Through Jack. I guess he took a little time away from talking to the tendera that was taking his order to make that suggestion to me. So this is what we got on the card today, other than the new feature suggested by Drive-Through Jack. I've got Branch versus Michael San Nicolas. And I've got Tina versus James W. Do you know what the W stands for, Jose?
That would be woke.
James Woke Moylan. This was on the card yesterday under the title Governor versus the Administrative Adjudication Law. Today, it's Tina versus James Woke. So let me start out with Branch versus Michael San Nicolas. Now, we know, I've repeated this so many times, the old saw about what constitutes news. If a dog bites a man, it ain't news. It happens all the time. But when a man bites a dog, that's news. And in this one, Branch versus Michael St. Nicholas, we have the man biting the dog. Here it goes. Delegate Michael St. Nicholas stay in government designated isolation facility without testing positive for the virus that causes Wuhan virus is under investigation to determine, among other things, why protocols for admission and stay were not followed, according to somebody named Adaloop, Mr. Adaloop. St. Nicholas, who's seeking re-election in a three-way delegate race, says he's, quote, ready to face whomever wants to make a story out of my health and the health care professionals diagnosing me. I don't think that Michael will have to make a story out of it. I think others are more than capable of doing that, Michael. Why don't we instead out those making these salacious allegations so they can face the music of their nonsense? There's another sound effect we got to develop, Jose.
Musical nonsense?
Music for nonsense, yeah. St. Nicholas, a Democrat, said when sought for comment, let's just say this is going to get really funny really fast. It's already really funny. St. Nicholas, in a Facebook message on Thursday, said he'd been sick the past few days and showed symptoms related to Wuhan virus. In the same 2-minute video message, he said he was diagnosed with viral pneumonia on Thursday and out of an abundance of caution was advised by a doctor to isolate himself. According to the commercials run by Robert Underwood, St. Nicholas has been isolating himself for the last 2 years. This shouldn't be hard for him. St. Nicholas said he's been staying at Bayview Hotel, a GovGuam Wuhan virus isolation facility. Now, I've explained this before. Quarantine is where you put people when you don't know if they're infected or not. Isolation is where you put them when you know that they are infected. So that's where St. Nicholas wants to go. He says he doesn't have it, but he wants to go to the isolation facility. Now, here comes in the other part of the card. Carlo Branch, the governor's policy director, said an investigation is underway following the discovery that the delegate allegedly used his familial connection to, familial connection. Hey, Nye, what do you think about that, Pari? To get admitted into an isolation facility instead of following protocol. Branch said the procedure requires a positive Wuhan virus test and for GovGuam to transport a Wuhan virus positive patient to the isolation facility. He said he made that clarification after different news organizations asked how the delegate was able to get into the isolation facility without testing positive for Wuhan virus. So I'm going to stop here and go back to I'm going to go back to the dog and the man. So you remember a guy named Matt Murphy, who several months ago busted out of a quarantine facility. He was on Tall Tales here. He got a lot of press out of it. So we're not surprised when people try to bust out of a quarantine facility. People try to escape from jail. People try to escape from prison. There's a really good movie called Escape from Alcatraz. I've seen it 3 or 4 times. So people do that when they're in confinement. They try to get away. They try to escape. That's the man biting, as you were. That's the dog biting the man. Here we have someone trying to bust in to the isolation facility. That, my friends, is the man biting the dog. Michael San Nicolas trying to figure out some way to get into the isolation facility.
Well, at least Mr. Branch said that they have a protocol.
Yes, indeed. Branch said San Nicolas called his sister-in-law to tell her he might be a clinical positive for the Wuhan virus. Branch said the sister-in-law, who's a Department of Ed nurse assigned to the Wuhan virus isolation facility, signed off on the delegate's admission. Ooh. This sounds more like the 19th floor. Yeah. Sounds more like the 19th floor than... I wonder if they got their locations wrong. They said it's the Bayview Hotel, but I don't know. The investigation, according to Branch, will include addressing the issue of ensuring the sanctity of the isolation unit. Apparently they do religious services there too. San Nicolas came back to Guam nearly 3 weeks ago. Prior to leaving Washington, he said he tested negative for the Wuhan virus and went through his 14-day quarantine period on Guam without Wuhan virus. However, San Nicolas said during the last couple days, he's been having a slight cough and shortness of breath and body aches. So he had himself tested on Thursday. The test came back negative for Wuhan virus, but the doctor did a chest x-ray because of the delegate's oxygen levels and other symptoms and diagnosed San Nicolas with viral pneumonia. Toka, the delegate said in his social media post. In the video, San Nicolas was in bed and was frequently coughing. It could be viral pneumonia without Wuhan virus, or it could be, for some reason, I'm testing negative, but the viral pneumonia is actually revealing that I have something. Either way, I feel really bad because after finishing my isolation period earlier, I was hoping to just get out there and, hit the road, wave, link up with a lot of you. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to do that now that I've checked in for this isolation period. I'm over here at Bayview. He said the Bayview staff is wonderful and the facility is well maintained. There's been an outpouring of support, prayers, and concern for San Nicolas on his social media page. Let me try that again with the right musical accompaniment. Okay. There's been an outpouring of support, prayers, and concern for San Nicolas on his social media page following his announcement of his conviction. I encourage people to hang in there, and thank you so much for your concern and prayers. We'll see you on Election Day. We look forward to showing results and staying positive, and having the right outlook in this community is what matters. I forgot my box of Kleenex again, Jose. Gosh. In a text message, San Nicolas said he may vote from the government isolation facility for the 2020 elections. San Nicolas, fellow Democrat and challenger in the delegate race, former delegate Robert Underwood, voted on Thursday morning at the Guam Election Commission. Republican Senator Will Castro, also a delegate candidate, said he plans to vote Friday, the last day for early voting. Oh, that's really important news. Thank you so much for putting that in there.
It's really very sensitive information.
Yeah, it is. Thank you for that, Jose.
She just released.
Yeah. So there we go. San Nicolas's sister-in-law seems to be the key player here. Let me take a short break and I'll finish up on my Branch versus San Nicolas.
Did you know your smartphone is one of the most powerful tools in our fight against COVID-19? That's why we're bringing you the Guam COVID Alert Exposure Notification app. Developed by Google, Apple, and the PathCheck Foundation, the app works by letting you know if you've been exposed to someone who's positive. It's completely voluntary, and more importantly, it's anonymous. Add your phone to the COVID fight. Go to guamcovidalert.guam.gov or download it from the App Store or Google Play now. Help Guam stop COVID-19.
Okay, Google. Hey, Siri. Hi, Bixby.
Go ahead. I'm listening.
Open the Point app. Opening.
Live stream, on demand, swap stations, check out the visual radio. Get the free app available on the App Store and Google Play or go to thepoint.gu. Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
So here we are again, back on Tall Tales with Branch versus San Nicolas, witnessing something that we thought we'd never see. We know that when people are put in quarantine at any one of the hotels, except perhaps with one exception, that being the 19th floor. Most people want to get out as fast as they can. We mentioned Matt Murphy, who was able to take an ambulance out of a quarantine facility. But now we've seen something we thought we'd never see before, someone using a familial connection to get into an isolation facility and apparently planning on staying there through Tuesday and planning on voting there. However, Carlo Branch, kind of the Sherlock Holmes of the Leon Guerrero administration, I can just see him with his deerstalker hat, says that there is an investigation to find out what San Nicolas is doing in isolation. So far, the investigation has turned up the fact that San Nicolas's sister-in-law signed off on his admission. That doesn't sound too good for the sister-in-law. Now, of course, we're not told a really important fact here. Was it an electronic signature or a manual signature? Because if it were an electronic signature, she might not remember it. These electronic signatures seem to be very easily forgotten. So, ironic, here's another irony. Michael San Nicolas belongs to which party? He's a Democrat. Carlo Branch belongs to which party? He's a Democrat. And here we have one Democrat ratting out another Democrat. How do things like that happen? I don't think Republicans rat out one another. Very interesting. I wonder if it has anything to do with San Nicolas refusing to sign the Unity Pledge when he first ran for D.C. Or is that just a coincidence? Anyhow, we'll be waiting for more dispatches from the isolation unit to see what's going on with Michael San Nicolas. Next item on the card is Tina Rose Munya Barnes versus James Woke Moylan. As I mentioned, this was on the card yesterday as you were the governor versus the administrative adjudication law. The story yesterday was that the governor had used her magic powers under a section of Chapter 19 of Title 10 U.S. As You Were Guam Code to say that the administrative adjudication law did not apply to the promulgation of rules dealing with the Wuhan virus. So there's a story in today's Post that picks up on that, and it says, Speaker denies Senator Moylan's request for emergency session. This is almost as ironic as San Nicolas trying to break into the isolation facility. Yeah, I think up until now, Tina is kind of like Will Rogers, you know, famous old-time comedian who was a really great guy, and one of his famous quotes was, "I never met a man I didn't like." Well, Tina picked up on, I never met a man I didn't like, and Tina's turned it into, I never met a request to suspend the public hearing requirement that I didn't like. So she's done it all over the place. But she says the Speaker won't call for an emergency session on Senator James Woke Moylan's bill that would prevent the governor from lifting processes on implementing rules and regulations. She said the legislature's rule in checking and balancing the powers of the executive branch applies to public finances and making sure the health and safety of our community is prioritized. This being said, when it comes to the violation or overreach of the law or an individual's rights, we have a third and co-equal branch of government, our courts. So the governor can do whatever she wants, and if she comes along with an initiative that is the proper subject of a law, the legislature should just say, we don't need to worry about that. Let the courts take care of it. The Speaker told Moylan that after a public hearing on his bill is held, after the public hearing, she would commit to ensuring that his measure is brought up to the oncoming session or to even call for an emergency session to address it after the public hearing. Mm-hmm. And the public hearing would have to be held before the legislature adjourns sine die. Any bookies out there who want some easy money, you can get really long odds on that public hearing happening before the legislature adjourns sine die. Moylan had introduced new legislation that he said would help ensure checks and balances between the branches, even in the midst of a public hearing emergency, the declaration of which provides the governor with broad powers. His bill would require legislative approval before the governor could, under a public health emergency, decide to bypass processes that promote government transparency and public input. So Moylan's bill said if the governor is going to suspend anything that has a transparency dimension, she has to get legislative approval. And that reminds me how he just went through the roof when the governor suspended the operation of the open government law. Remember that? Oh, he was madder than a hatter. He was just furious. And do you remember what he did, Jose?
It's not what he did. It's what he didn't do.
Yeah, he didn't do anything at all. And this story about him being so angry, the name of the program is, after all, Tall Tales. I don't know that he even mentioned it in any of his public offerings. Moylan's bill would require legislative approval before the governor could, under a public health emergency, decide to bypass processes that promote government transparency and public input. He had requested the Speaker to waive the public hearing requirement and hold an emergency session on his bill. But you know where he made his mistake, Jose? He didn't ask Tina to co-sponsor the bill. Because you'll recall when 3 bills were introduced, when there was this mad rush to pay government employees who actually went to work, mad rush to pay them double. There were 3 bills introduced. one of which was co-sponsored by Speaker Tina Rose Munya Barnes. That was sufficient reason to suspend the public hearing requirement. So she introduced her bill. She called the legislature in special session. She announced that she had waived the public hearing requirement for all three bills, but the legislature would go in session the next day. So the key seemed to be the fact that Tina was a co-sponsor. So when the legislature went in session the next day, this is another dog biting a man biting a dog story. Senator Joe San Augustine said, I want to adjourn until next Friday because I want to have public hearings on these three bills. So, Jim, I'll tell you what you could have done. You could have borrowed a trick from the Bob and Ray book. And when you drafted your bill, put your name up on the top and put Tina Rose Munya Barnes up on the top. Now, the rule is that its co-sponsor actually has to initial. But you could have just put it up there anyhow. The only people who would have objected are in your party. That would have been Mary Torres, and the one whose name shall never pass our lips, who both of them got quite excited when the Bob and Ray resolution was made public and had their names on it without their permission. So they might have gotten a little bit upset. But anyhow, going on with this news story. The legislation was written in response to the governor's most recent executive order. Quote, while the intent is to assist in curtailing the spread of the virus, the executive order opens the door to potential abuse. Jim, opens the door? That door was taken off the hinges months ago. That draft coming in at you all the time, that's because that door has been long gone. The governor recently signed an executive order lifting the Administrative Adjudication Act process that requires the government to inform residents of proposed changes to rules and regulations, explain why the changes are needed, and request residents to comment. Governor Leon Guerrero's executive order noted that removing this process will help the Department of Public Harassment and Secret Services respond quicker to issues that rise during the course of the public health emergency. The governor cited her own authority under the state of emergency to lift the AAA process. This isn't the first time the governor has tried to lift a restriction in the name of ensuring quick public health emergency response to the current pandemic, the reporter tells us. In March, the governor signed an executive order that, among other things, aimed to improve government efficiency by removing the, quote, bureaucracy, a requirement of announcing a government meeting 5 days in advance, among other things. The Vigilance Committee, an organization that promotes government transparency, challenged the governor's decision to suspend a law that holds the government and its boards and commissions accountable to the public. Munya Barnes said she won't allow emergency session on Moylan's bill, specifically citing the Organic Act. While I have taken a very liberal approach with my analysis of addressing the crisis at hand, it solely relies on one thing. Even if it has to be a far stretch, will the proposed measure make the crisis better? Well, that was the analysis she went through with the double pay for government employees. Will my proposed bill make the crisis better? Oh, yeah, because it will pay these hardworking government employees double. And they'll remember that on Tuesday when they go to vote. I just added that. Quote, your measure proposes to hamper public health's approach to responding to a crisis, not make it better. While you argue that the executive order may be an overreach of the Emergency Powers Act, precedent set by the Supreme... Tina is a constitutional scholar. Precedent set by the Supreme Court's ruling on Marbury versus Madison clearly states that this would be a matter for the courts, not the legislature. You know the old saying that a little knowledge is a dangerous more? A little knowledge is a dangerous thing. Well, in this case, when Tina cites Marbury versus Matter, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. A little bit more is catastrophic.
She would have been better off saying, I'm going to wait till I consult with the AG.
Yeah, with counsel, with legal counsel.
With legal counsel.
Yeah, yeah. So Marbury versus Madison is a famous old case. It's a case that John Marshall made up so that the Supreme Court could rule on the constitutionality of federal statutes. And that's all Marbury versus Madison did. It's not the only case in the field, but you know, if you're going to cite Supreme Court cases, you kind of need to know what they're about. So then she goes on to say, me granting a waiver, when is it okay to start a sentence with me? If you're not the president of the University of Guam. Me granting a waiver would violate 2 GCA section 2103A, and that's her magic power to suspend public hearing requirements. Me granting a waiver would violate 2 GCA section 2103A since I don't have a bill to provide for double pay on the agenda. Very good, Tina. Very good reasoning. The Speaker also said the Public Health Acting Director, Art San Augustine, he's not the acting director anymore. He was confirmed, Tina. Remember that?
He was confirmed or somebody else was confirmed?
No, Art was confirmed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Stated Moylan's bill would hamper his ability to respond to the public health emergency on our... That's all you need. The Director of Public Harassment and Secret Services says, this would hamper us. Well, I guess you could say that in a sense about governments other than dictatorships. Dictatorships and mobs can act instantaneously. They don't have to go through this rigmarole of enacting laws and voting and public participation and notice and things like that. So I have to agree with Art. Yeah, so long as Lou has dictatorial powers, his abilities aren't hampered to do whatever it is that in his heart of hearts he thinks is the right thing to do. Tina Rose added that the state surgeon, Dr. Michael W. Cruz, I didn't put that W in there. Yeah, I didn't know that about Dr. Mike Cruz. Said Moylan's bill may take away from the governor's ability to respond to a public health emergency. I have only one thing to say about his comment and Art San Augustine's comment. Duh. This thing called the Constitution, that will hamper Art's ability to respond to a public health emergency. And Dr. Mike Cruz, this thing called the Constitution may take away from the governor's ability to respond to a public health emergency. Tina Rose also alluded to the amount of time required to pass legislation, even if a public hearing requirement is waived, would take time. Your proposed plan of action, should it be passed by this body, I imagine would take days of debate on the session floor, and upon engrossment and then passage would allow the chief executive another 10 days to either pass or veto the measure. Should our governor veto your proposed measure, we would have to come back to the legislative branch to attempt an override. Tina really understands how those two branches of the government work. So let's take a quick break here, and I got somebody on the line, but I don't know who it is.
got a job to do. Having the right equipment for the job is critical, and East West Rental has the exact tools you need. Get it done faster with the right stuff, whether it's landscaping tools, concrete tools, lifts, trucks, lights, generators, trench boxes, welders, tents, tables, and chairs. They're here to help you tackle any project you're working on, big or small. Open Monday to Saturday, 7 to 5, closed Sundays. Find what you're looking for at East West Rental Center in Upper Tumont or call 646-1463.
Contact tracing is key to containing COVID-19. That's why we're introducing the Guam COVID Alert app. According to Oxford University, for every 100 to 200 downloads of this app, 100 infections can be prevented and 1 life can be saved. Help save a life. Go to guamcovidalert.guam.gov or download the app from the App Store or Google Play now. Add your phone to the COVID fight. Help Guam stop COVID-19.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mezcla. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and Mezcla Dos are open for takeout and delivery services. More details, call the Hagåtña location at 479-2652 or Mezcla Dos Upper Tumon at 646-6295. Get your Mezcla fix at the comfort of your home.
Okay, here we are, The Entertainer. I really like that song. And on the line, waiting in the green room, is our Keith. Good afternoon, our Keith.
Good afternoon, Bob. I just finished cleaning the coffee off my dashboard as you read Tina Barnes' comment about Marbury versus Madison. Now, I am not a lawyer. I have taken no legal course in my life, but I am a scientist. I'm not entirely dim. And I certainly, myself, read that on the Post today and just... All right. Are we sure her name isn't Nancy?
Well, she is a speaker after all, so it may come with the territory, right?
Exactly. I won't rant about that particular topic because, frankly, while I was on the hold, you pretty much covered everything. Speaker Barnes' hypocrisy and selective application of when and when not public input is warranted or is just staggering. This is, I guess, what you get when you've got single party rule. I found the Guam Daily Post today to be a wash in government, in either incompetence or malfeasance. I'm not even sure which. There's another story about with CARES Act funding, the governor decides to buy 10 police cars. Is that what that money is for? Buying vehicles?
There apparently are not many restrictions, but there are Mitsubishis. I wonder who the Mitsubishi dealer is on the island.
Oh, I didn't think of that.
Yeah.
I didn't think of that.
Maybe one of our Facebook posters could tell me who the Mitsubishi dealer is on island.
Yeah. I wondered, I guess that she already has some new office furniture or picnic supplies or any other relevance, so I figured the vehicles were best. I was under the impression that the CARES money was to go to the people.
Yeah, good call.
And then the last one, the one that had me sort of scratching at the screen, was on the article concerning the new fines that Her Majesty wishes to impose, and the comment from the Democrat Party apparatchik, who spokesman of the Democrat Party, who says something along the lines of, why are the Republicans fighting this? Why don't they just ask? Quote, the governor is doing all that she can.
It's just like the $10,000 bereavement money. It's the least she can do, right?
That was precisely where I was going with that.
Uh-huh.
Where does one begin? Is it stupidity? Is it malfeasance? Is it both? everything that she can. Clearly, she's not paying attention to the science. Anyone who reads the science that has been available, at least for the past month, regarding lockdowns, regarding spread, the viability of masks, she's ignoring it all. So all that she can is not necessarily all that she should. Anyway, I just needed to get that off my chest.
Well, you came to the right place, Arkees. I'm glad I could be of some assistance. I never was a nurse, but I would try to have a good bedside manner for you, okay?
Oh, yeah, and one last thing. I think who's the gentleman who works for the governor who's looking into the San Nicolas matter?
That'd be the fourth branch of government.
Yeah, Carlo Branch. Yeah, there's the judicial branch, the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the Carlo branch.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if the reason that she has set him on San Nicolas is that only she should be able to get away with such behavior. Her in the legislation, and that she just doesn't like the competition.
Good call, Arkees. Good call.
Have a nice Friday.
Okay, good. Glad you called, Arkees. See you later. Yeah, so the final paragraph, your proposed action, should it be passed by this body, I would take days of debate on the session floor. We can't have that. Debate on the session floor? Heaven forbid. Okay, let's break for the big halftime show, and I'll come back, and we've still got a lot more to talk about here on the speaker versus Jim Moylan, James W. Short halftime, a big halftime show coming up.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
A key ballot ruling in a crucial state. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. A 7-day extension for receiving absentee ballots in Minnesota has been struck down.
A ruling from a U.S. Court of Appeals says the Minnesota Secretary of State's office did not have the power to extend the deadline for absentee ballots that was laid out by the legislature. So now all absentee ballots must be to Minnesota election officials by 8 p.m. on Election Day.
Reporter Hannah Flood with Fox 9 in Minneapolis reports nearly 400,000 requested absentee ballots in Minnesota have yet to be returned. Both of the candidates will campaign in Minnesota today and in Wisconsin. President Trump also has a rally scheduled in Michigan. Joe Biden will stop in Iowa. In a social media message, the president says Minnesota's Democratic governor has ordered attendance limited to just 250 people. Mr. Trump says they were expecting 25,000. Both men were in Florida on Thursday.
While Joe Biden spoke to supporters in South Florida, President Trump held a campaign rally in Tampa, going after Biden in personal terms.
Sleepy Joe's a little bit off. Let's face it, Sleepy Joe is shot. And I'm not a fan of his, and he's not a nice guy.
Florida, with its 29 electoral votes, is critical to the president's path to re-election. The president won the Sunshine State by 1.2% over Hillary Clinton 4 years ago.
Fox's John Decker. Joe Biden also held an event in Tampa, cut short by a downpour. 6 people are known dead in the wake of Hurricane Zeta. 1 electrocuted, another drowned, 4 people killed by falling trees. The remnants of that storm have now moved off the East Coast. A hearing in Illinois today on Wisconsin's extradition request for Kyle Rittenhouse, the teenager charged with killing 2 people during riots in Kenosha, Wisconsin in August. His attorneys will call an expert on self-defense. America is listening to Fox News.
Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Hagatna and Mezcla Dos Upper Tumon are now open for takeout and delivery services. For more information, call now at 479-2652 or 3 or Mezcla Dos at 646-6295. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro brings you island hospitality with the true taste of modern Chamorro cuisine at the comfort of your own home. They take your local favorite dishes and serve them with extra flair you will only find at Mezcla. Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, launch! That's just what we did with our new state-of-the-art mobile banking app as we celebrate 66 years of serving our island communities. It's loaded with a ton of new user-friendly features, including remote deposit capture. It's another way of saying you don't have to come to the bank to go to the bank. And if you want to come to the bank, we're happy to see your smiling face as long as you're wearing a mask. And we don't have long lines. Bank Pacific grows but branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
The federal government announcing seizures of oil and missiles, which Iran was trying to sell.
The Justice Department announced 2 forfeiture complaints relating to weapons and oil seized from Iran. They say in July they got authorization to sell more than 1 million barrels of Iranian oil seized before it made its way to Venezuela. They also announced that in August they filed a complaint seeking to forfeit Iranian weapons that the U.S. took from 2 flagless ships in the Arabian Sea months earlier.
Drone components, thousands of explosive blasting caps, anti-tank guided missiles, surface-to-air missiles, a whole array of very dangerous components that were en route to Yemen.
D.C. U.S. Attorney Michael Sherwin says the judge's order allowing the selling of the oil and the action that allowed the weapon seizures were unsealed. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
The State Department has agreed to turn over to Japan 2 American men accused of smuggling former Nissan chairman Carlos Ghosn out of the country while he was awaiting trial. A federal judge has temporarily blocked the removal of Army Special Forces veteran Michael Taylor and his son Peter pending their appeal. France still reeling from a Thursday terror attack.
France is under attack. Those were the words of President Emmanuel Macron following the 3rd attack in 2 months blamed on Islamic extremists. It happened in the city of Nice as a man armed with a knife shouting Allahu Akbar killed 3 people inside the city's largest church. Among them, the church warden and an elderly lady who he decapitated. The attacker is reported to have arrived in Europe from Tunisia on a migrant boat just last month. He was shot and wounded during his arrest. President Macron visited the site and was defiant.
If we've been attacked again, it's because of our values, our taste for freedom, the possibility there is here to believe freely and not to give in to any terror.
2 other attacks were also foiled in France, while a guard at the French embassy in Saudi Arabia was also stabbed.
Fox's Benjamin Hall. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Half a day. This is Clara Manglona from Security Title with an important warning. Wire fraud is real, and home buyers and sellers are one of the biggest targets, even on Guam. When sending money by wire transfer, be sure to confirm the wire instructions by phone, not email. In this case, it's good to be suspicious and know who you're dealing with. Let the professionals at Security Title work with you to minimize loss due to wire fraud. We are here to help.
Half a day. I'm Will Castro and I'm running for Congress. This general election, I humbly ask for your vote in order that I may continue to build bridges and find solutions so that generations now and generations to come may live here and raise a family of their own, one day on a better Guam. If given the opportunity to serve you in Congress, you can count on me to honor and represent you well. Guahu si William Castro, malalagadzut po Kongreso. Zanhua preba, estina mensahi. Bob Pelkey, Treasurer.
Eivetsem rerivetter COVID-19 rettuurun irisits ekkio ravukora miats job irisin. Igen mi be fi worunga versavai kose bocher kopon naborong neibom. Inge kai kie gauru kewe sinerevetter kose bocher mutir köri uriget eu redarrob werisuk. Kasabuiti utira toriom ka semuriro ibe kopop köri ekkererier ernisire semmun. Kose bocher siboturu ekkio ravukora mekkio irmia pagapang iri semmun. Ato waware fidong iriakots puru raiwe pot na warong neibom ike pure miwe fiop sawai. Mutir nageo desi COVID-19 ike pure mi tsurievel mi semmun. Mutir ne förie kierennis me pure negoruk pangiri baraban arabas medisin. Siresin fitto siri manielu atse office in Micronesian Resource Center me QS Station City Choice Broadcasting.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
Okay, so here we are. Big halftime show winds up the first half of Tall Tales. That means we're in the second half of Tall Tales for the last day of this week. It means I've only got about 52 more minutes of happiness till the end of Tall Tales. And then the suffering begins and it'll last all throughout the weekend, right on down to 1600 on Monday, when I can get back to Tall Tales. Okay, so I was reading a rather humorous missive from Tina Rose Munia Barnes, the Speaker of the Guam Legislature, and I'm going to just pick up on the last sentence of Tina's letter here, where she's telling Jim Moylan, I'm not going to call the legislature into in an emergency session. I'm not going to waive the public hearing requirement for your bill. And then she lays out the reason. Your proposed plan of action should be passed by this body. I imagine would take days of debate on the session floor. And you know we have more important things to do than debate bills on the session floor. And then upon engrossment and then passage would allow the chief executive another 10 days to pass or veto the measure. Boy, Tina's got this procedure just right down pat. First Marbury versus Madison, and then explaining to the world at large how the process works. And she goes on to say, should our governor veto your proposed measure, we would have to come back to the legislative branch to attempt an override. Tina, I thought you didn't like it. So now you're saying if we did it and the governor vetoed it, we'd have to override it.
Is she saying she doesn't like her job?
I have a feeling others will say that come January. Tina, you know, you really don't like your job. Maybe you'd be happier doing something else. Okay, so that's Tina Rose's letter, which, you know, is not really very complimentary of Jim Moylan. Now, next I'm going to go to the actual regulations, the draft regulations that were passed around this morning, and then I'm going to come back to another letter from Tina to Jim. The rules are cited as Chapter 4. That would be the Guam Administrative Rules, Title 26, Chapter 4, Article 28, Rules Governing the Enforcement of Public Health Guidances and Directives During the Wuhan Virus Public Health Emergency. Now, as Drive-Through Jack pointed out yesterday, in her executive order, didn't she void the rulemaking procedure? Didn't she say that is no longer effective? So if she did, what mechanism does she have to promulgate rules if she has neutered the rules-making procedure in an executive order? Well, if she's depending only on the administrative adjudication law, the answer is none. She doesn't have authority to do it. Now, there is a section in the Organic Act that says that the governor has the ability to promulgate executive orders and rules that are not inconsistent with Guam law. So then, if she has negated the rulemaking procedure, would it be inconsistent with Guam law to enact a rule pursuant to the Organic Act authority? Maybe, maybe not. This is why lawyers charge you the big bucks, because they go through statutes and constitutions and organic acts and parse them and say, well, is this what this really means? And if it does, doesn't it follow that this result has to occur? So it could very well be that when the rules that she enacts are challenged, what we're going to refer to as the drive-through Jack challenge. Boy, Jack really had an impact yesterday, didn't he? The drive-through Jack challenge may be one of the challenges on the list. It's not strong, but it's there. Now let's talk about the rules. She says that her authority is Title 10, Guam Code Annotated, Chapter 19, and in Section 19802 authorizes the Department of Public Harassment and Secret Services to promulgate and implement rules to implement and effectuate the provisions of this chapter and to enforce the provisions of this chapter through the imposition of fines and penalties, the issuance of orders, and such other remedies as are provided by law. And I covered this yesterday, and that's exactly what 19802 says. So taken at its face value, a rule properly enacted, would allow for fines, fees, and orders. Then there's the obligatory definitional section. And then at 428105, authority to issue and enforce guidances and directives to prevent transmission of Wuhan virus. During a state of public health emergency, the Department of Public Harassment and Secret Services shall use every available means to prevent the transmission of Wuhan virus and to ensure that all cases are subject to proper control and treatment, including entry into and inspection of public and private premises for the purposes of ensuring compliance with DPHSS guidelines and directives. So, in a sense, this section doesn't say, it says one thing and then it says nothing. Anybody has permission to go into a public, how do they call it? Public premises. Now, to go into a private premises without the owner's permission, you can't do that with a simple rule. You can't suspend the Fourth Amendment, which I'll read again. This may be the first, if the governor's listening, this may be the first time she's ever heard this. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, particularly describing the place to be searched and persons or things to be seized. So the fact that the governor wants to come over to my house, that secret location located on the northern end of the island, kind of like Wolfman Jack's lair in American Graffiti, if you happen to see that movie, Jose.
A long time ago.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of driving in that movie.
Yeah. If she came to my house, she can't just come and open the door and walk in. She or Art St. Augustine or any of the minions of the Department of Public Health and Secret Services, they could knock on the door, and I might even answer it, and they could say, Bob, we are going to come into your house to see if you are complying with all of the executive orders dealing with the virus. Please move over, Bob. I would then say, nope, look out, you're going to get hurt when I slam this door in your face. And I would slam the door. One person, right? I would slam the door in their face. Because absent a search warrant or absent the finding of a police officer that there's probable cause to believe that a felony is going on inside, they don't have the authority to come into my house. And I'm not going to let them.
That didn't stop them from not revealing that those who went into quarantine had counsel available. Yeah. So I could just see them going around just conveniently omitting
some of these niceties, some of these things that, what did Art St. Augustine say?
It's for your own good.
Yeah. Might hamper the necessity for a search warrant might hamper his ability to respond to the public health emergency on our hands. And Dr. Mike Cruz might say it may take away from the governor's ability to respond to the public health emergency if they had to do that.
It's just nuisances, these warrants.
Then we do have another amendment here that's arguably on point. Maybe not. Anyhow, that's what it says. So the rest of it, of course, we understand. Public health has a duty to deal with this virus. 428-106, penalties and fines. And this one says, it shall be unlawful for any person or business to violate or fail to obey any guidance or directive issued by DPHSS with respect to Wuhan virus public health emergency declared in Executive Order 2020-03. It shall be unlawful for any person or business to violate or fail to obey any guidance. Now, what exactly does guidance mean? Does that mean that Art St. Augustine could wheel on up to the front door of any one of our Catholic churches at the beginning of Mass and say, you folks who are going to go into church, I have some guidance for you. You should probably go home and stay home. And if you don't, there's a cop here that's going to arrest you for violating my guidance. Not for violating the law, not for violating a statute, but for violating my guidance. Any guidance issued by DPHSS. Now,
Watch out, children.
Yeah.
There's a 2-page spread of guidance.
Of guidance on how to celebrate Halloween. Yeah. Now, any guidance, and then it says issued by DPHSS. Now, if it said the Director of Public Harassment and Secret Services, I could understand what it means, but when it says issued by a department, arguably that means anybody at public health with a pencil can issue directives instead of the director. When authority is decided, all of you out there that want to draft things, when you assign a duty in the government of Guam, you don't assign it to a department. You assign it to the director. That way you can hold the director responsible for carrying it out. And the director can accomplish these things through the aids of his deputies and assistants. He can assign some of the authority, but he can't assign the responsibility. But here is this vague reference to DPHSS. Everybody knows that's department, that's public health. Yeah. Okay, so there's that problem. B, any person who violates or fails to obey any guidance or directive, now they're not the same thing. Directive and there's a distinction here. Guidance and directives are not synonyms, which they could be if they weren't connected by the word or, the disjunctive. Issued by the public health authority with respect to the virus, public health emergency declared in an executive order shall be punishable as follows. 1, for the first offense, such person shall be guilty of a violation punishable by a fine not to exceed $100. It's a violation. So I guess that means that we would treat this the same way as other violations, like traffic violations, uniform citation, come to court, pay the fine, et cetera, $100. For the second offense, such person shall be guilty of a violation punishable by a fine not to exceed $250. So wandering around without your mask could cost you a lot of money. For the third offense and each additional violation thereafter, such person shall be guilty of a misdemeanor, punishable by imprisonment not to exceed 1 year, or by a fine not to exceed $1,000. Now, going back again to Part A, unlawful for any person to violate guidance or directive issued by public health. So we start out with the proposition that the legislature makes laws. The legislature delegates some of that lawmaking authority, ordinarily through the administrative adjudication law, to government agencies. So if that is a valid delegation, that's the first delegation. Then the second delegation goes to the Department of Public Health and Secret Services, because they're the ones who can issue the directive or guidance. So do we know what it is that would cause us to be fined $100? No, because we'd have to page through all of the stuff that all of those directives that the Director of Public Health has promulgated and try to figure out what it is that we can do and can't do. And since we don't have any regular procedure for putting those things in place, it could be different when you wake up tomorrow morning than it was when you went to bed tonight.
Yeah, the to have them published has been suspended as well.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. There's no need to even publish these
Who
things.
knows? They can make something up there on the spot.
Well, and this thing with guidance, yeah, that's exactly what it suggests. So it is ripe for challenge. But of course, the question is, who is going to have standing to challenge this? And the rules standing are pretty clear that you can't, because you don't like the law, and because you look at the law and it's unconstitutional on its face, and you're a citizen, that doesn't give you the ability to challenge it. You would not have standing. In order to have standing, you have to show a current, real, and measurable, I'm paraphrasing, injury. So the only people who would have the ability to challenge this would be the people who get busted. So most people, if people are busted for this, if they're issued citations, most people can't whip down to the court and file a lawsuit. Now, some of us are lucky, that when they deal with the Director of Land Management, who's a scofflaw, can bring suit pursuant to the open government law, and with a lot of patience and enough money to bankroll it up front, recover their attorney's fees. But that's small comfort to the average person who gets caught up in this web of extremely vague legislation by the governor, not the legislature, it's very difficult to know exactly what the law is. You know, in a couple of acts, wearing a mask, you could do this. You could be sitting in a restaurant with someone who's not a member of your own family at a table in the restaurant where you're not 6 feet away from the other person. You got 3 violations right there. Is that $1,000 worth? And the rules go on to say, any business that violates or fails to obey any guidance or directive issued by public health, etc., shall be punishable as follows. Punishable. For the first offense, such business shall be guilty of a violation punishable by a fine not to exceed $1,000. For the second such offense, such business shall be guilty of a violation by a fine not to exceed $2,500. For the third violation, $10,000. Now, I made a remark on Ray's show the other day. We probably should label this the McCrout rules, because I have a suspicion that the fourth branch of government
inspired.
Yeah, they're saying we gotta get this guy McCrout. He's just thumbing his nose at us.
We tried to shame him.
Yeah, we got to do something about this.
How close is this to almost declaring some sort of martial law scenario?
Well, martial law means martial means military. Martial law means you're using the military to enforce civil law. So it's not martial law.
But wasn't there talks of enacting the Guard to do some of this patrolling or whatever it's called?
Even so, I don't think that rises to the level of martial law. It arguably it does, because guardsmen are soldiers, martial law, etc. But it's more than using guardsmen as sort of like police officers. In martial law, you don't have access to the courts. You go before a military.
Oh, everything's negated.
Yeah, everything. Yeah. Pre-1950 Guam was martial law. You had the naval governor who had he was all 3 branches. This may have been before Carlo was born, but the naval governor exercised the powers of all 3 branches of government. That's what martial law means. Soldiers in the Army can't enforce civil law. There's a federal statute that makes it a crime to use the Army to enforce civil law. And that is a post-Reconstruction statute where, in order to enable the Jim Crow laws in the South, Congress passed a statute that says anybody who uses the Army to enforce civil law can be fined or imprisoned. So that's an old law, and it's still on the books. That doesn't apply to the Army National Guard, though, unless they're on active duty pursuant to mobilization by the president. Okay, let's break here for the 7th inning stretch, and I'm going to come back to Moylan, Barnes versus Moylan.
We all need to fight COVID-19, and we need all the weapons we can get to beat it. Your smartphone can be one of the most powerful tools to battle this pandemic. The Guam COVID Alert Exposure Notification app can let you know if you've been exposed to someone who has the virus. Add your phone to the COVID fight by going to guamcovidalert.guam.gov or download it from the App Store or Google Play now. Help Guam stop COVID-19.
Okay, Google. Hey, Siri. Hi, Bixby.
Go ahead. I'm listening.
Open the Point app. Opening.
Live stream, on demand, swap stations. Check out the visual radio. Get the free app available on the App Store and Google Play, or go to thepoint.gu.
Okay, seventh inning stretch from Wrigley Field, Chicago. Chicago has its own problems, but they don't have a mayor like we have a governor. So here we are, back in Lululand, going over the governor's latest promulgation of rules. And I see a couple questions here on Facebook. Jeff Jones, what about due process for contesting the fines if levied? Lynn McAfee, not only is the list of things that you can do wrong broad and vague, but there seems to be an assumption there is due process attached to these violations and fines retribution. I don't find anything in the decree that indicates due process is attached. Well, it's the word violation. And if you look in Title IX of the Government Code, which is the criminal code, you'll find the word violation. So we have violations, petty misdemeanors, third, second, first-degree felonies. That's the hierarchy of our criminal fines. So a violation, a traffic offense is a violation. So your due process there comes when you go to traffic court, and that's when you that's your due process, and that's when you're able to raise your defenses, etc. And from traffic court, the appeal lies to the Superior Court. And then Lynn also says, she also had a post about anybody up for planning and attending another protest. I'd be interested to see what happens with this new EO at a protest. I don't know if anybody's interested. I'm interested, but don't tell me about any motorcades. That is not a protest. But if you want to have a protest down at Adeloop, on the Adeloop side of the street, yeah, and you do it where I can come in accordance with the schedule here, I'll be there. You can bet on that, Lynn. And I suspect if you put some organization into it, others would be there too. Randy Landis says, so basically the Lou law says you cannot open your business to make money, and if you do, we will take it from you. I suppose that's a simplified version. I think that's certainly the intent of the regulation, right? Then it goes on to say, the regulation goes on to say at 428108, during a state of public emergency, DPHSS may request assistance in enforcing guidances and directives issued pursuant to 10 GCA, etc. So when they say DPHSS, I think that probably means the director could reach out to the chief of police, right?
By phone?
Reach out to, yeah. You can't call anybody on the phone and ask them to do something. You have to reach out. It sounds so much more genuine.
It's kind of hard to reach out when you have to keep a safe distance.
Only people with really long arms can reach out anymore.
That's a violation.
Yeah. So the apparent intent here now, in a rational administration, before this ever hit the street, the governor would have talked to the chief of police and said, Chief, this is what we need to do. I would like you to put together a plan as to how we could use uniformed police officers to enforce this. And when I have your plan, I'll promulgate the executive order. The way this administration runs, the chief of police will find out about it when he sees this in the newspaper.
By the way, here's 10 new cars.
And she'll handle this the same way she did the free Wuhan virus tests at the various clinics. No clinic should charge you for a test. It's free. Don't let them charge you for a test. Yeah, that made the post again today. So, of course, this is not a rational administration. So sooner or later, I suspect that police officers will be used to enforce these regulations. And of course, being a police officer is, like almost everything, a zero-sum game. When he's running around to check and see if restaurants are allowing people in without masks. They're not out there catching bank robbers and drug dealers and serial killers and things like that. It's a good use of resources, and of course, we're not supporting public safety anyhow. Okay, and then just to know that the governor is really serious about this, Section 428019, severability. If any provision or application or any provision of these rules and regulations are held invalid, such invalidity shall not affect the provisions or applications of these rules and regulations. She learned that when she was the majority leader. You got to put a severability. People won't think you're serious if you don't put a severability clause in there. So that's the rules. And of course, it's not, the tip-offs were there. The tells were all there. We had a couple of doctors come out before Lou suspended the administrative adjudication law, talking about how hard it was, that we didn't need more rules. We just needed to have enforcement. And if you waded through the entire executive order that suspended the administrative adjudication law, you would see all the numbers of how many times the cops were called, et cetera, laying the foundation for what we have here, basically the criminalization. And here's another thing. Can you turn on the Law and Order notebook sign? Yeah. When you're talking about the criminal law, there are two basic kinds of crimes. One type of crime is called malum in se. The other type of crime is called malum prohibitum. Malum in se means bad in themselves. You don't need a statute. You know it's wrong. Murder is malum in se. Rape is malum in se. Robbery, burglary, and mayhem, all five of those things are malum in se. You don't need to have a degree in philosophy to understand why the criminal law should address murder or rape. Malum prohibitum means these things are not bad in themselves. They're bad because we have passed a law that says they are bad. Gambling. Went back in the U.S. for a long time, being open on Sunday was malum, store being open on
Blue
Sunday.
laws.
Yeah, blue laws. Malum prohibitum. And on and on and on. So when you're dealing with crimes that are not malum in se, where we start out with a proposition that from about the time you learn how to talk, you know these things are wrong. When we're talking about malum in se, people's natural sense of right and wrong sometimes is not the appropriate guidance to know what to do and not to do. Running around without a cloth mask on your face is not malum in se. It's not an evil that everyone understands, as are all of these regulations that have come out of the Department of Public Harassment and Secret Service. So all the more reason to go through the proper public process with these so people would know that these things are now against the law, even though our natural sense of right and wrong won't get us to the right address here. There's that. Okay, then I have, kind of saving the best for last year. I have a letter from Tina Rose Munya Barnes addressed to Senator Moylan. They got his initial wrong here. It says the Honorable James C. Moylan. Must be a typo. And she thanks him for his letter. And she says, I agree with you that the legislative branch serves as checks and balances for our government when it comes to public finances, etc. And then she goes on to say, this being said, when it comes to violation or overreach of the law, or an individual's rights, I like this so much I'm going to do it again. We have a co-equal branch of government, our courts. In fact, middle school American history classes teach us about a landmark case, Marbury versus Madison, which established the court's role to conduct judicial review, where they determine the constitutionality of the actions of the executive and legislative branch. James Woke Moylan ought to be insulted here. If you had the intelligence of a middle schooler, James, you wouldn't have written that letter.
Are you smarter than a fifth grader?
Yeah.
That was probably one of the questions.
Probably. Given that even during a global pandemic, our laws still apply, I am hesitant to redress your request in whole for the following reasons. First of all, compliance with 2 GCA 2103A. While I have granted 25 public hearing waivers this term, she has granted so many waivers that I have a count up on the calendar. It's been 66 days since she granted her last one. I have granted 25 public hearing waivers this term, some of which did not even apply to my own bills. I have been able to justify that there is an impending threat to the public health or safety, such as providing double pay for government of Guam workers. Of our very liberal approach with my analysis of addressing the crisis at hand. It solely relies on one thing. Even if it has a far reach, will the proposed measure make the crisis better? Now, Tina, even probably a third grade English language student would know that you probably don't want to make the crisis better. What you want to do is lessen the crisis, right? Alleviate the crisis.
I think she was trying to lift that from Senator Mary Torres without plagiarizing her.
Is that what Mary Torres said, to make the crisis better?
You can't erase a pandemic. Speaking
yes.
about your resolution.
Yeah, so Tina says she wants, she is only interested in a measure that will make the crisis better. That was a pretty serious crisis they had there. The SARS epidemic was a pretty serious crisis, but this Wuhan crisis is even better, right? Yeah. Yeah, well, middle school English students would know not to say that, Tina, unless that's what they really mean. Your measure proposes to hamper public health's approach to responding to a crisis, not make it better. So, Jim, you're not trying to make it better. Well, you argue that the executive order may be an overreach of the Emergency Powers Act, precedents set by the Supreme Court's ruling on Marbury versus, we've already been through that one. And then she says, me granting a waiver would violate 2 GCA 2103. And again, even though we are in a pandemic, I agree with your sentiments that the laws need to apply to maintain order. So this is that sentence where she started out with me. First of all, it's not good to start a sentence with the first person singular. And if you are, it has to be in the nominative case, not the objective case. That would be I, not me. All right, then she goes on, compliance with 1423D of the Organic Act. As a member of the Guam legislature, we all took an oath to faithfully support the laws of the United States and Guam. One of these laws, she says it's section 1421G, but in the heading she says 1423D. Which is it? Which authorizes the governor to protect against the importation and spread of disease. It doesn't authorize anything. It gives him that responsibility. Well, I understand your reservations with regard to the qualified medical advice that is being dispensed by the state surgeon and the governor's physicians group. I am not a medical expert. I did reach out to our public health authority, Director Art San Augustine, who stated that this measure may hamper. Yeah, I've already talked about that. And then the next part of her letter is the really key part. And if I can't get to it today, I for sure will get to it on Monday. The next part of her letter is called Not Exhausting the Avenue Prescribed by Law, 10 GCA Section 19405C. And if you don't know what that section refers to, it is the basis for the Bob and Ray resolution. So I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to talk with Martinez for a minute. I'm going to talk with Jack is on his way to supper. And if I have time, I'll go into this before the end of the program. If not, Monday for sure. Good afternoon, Martinez.
Good afternoon, Bob. Can you hear me loud and clear?
5 by 5, Martinez.
I'm sorry for calling this late. I don't do this, but I rarely have guests. I had a guest that was planned. The guest just left. But this is why I'm calling. Ray Gibson agreed, and it seems like Kim Jong-il agreed, and we reconfirmed it today, to have, I was just asking to debate Kim Jong-il, the candidate, one-on-one, just for 6 minutes. I talk 2 minutes uninterrupted. He gets 2 minutes up uninterrupted. I reply 1 minute uninterrupted. He gets 1 minute up. Both times I let him get the last word. And today, I had the assurance of Ray that he was going to call me before 12 noon. And the phone rang twice, and I was in the bathroom. Then they hung up. Well, even if I was sitting down, I couldn't answer it in 2 rings. And it was so quick, there's not even, where you can see the number. I hope that Ray's not backing down. And I hope that Ken is not backing down. If he doesn't want to debate just for 6 minutes, then he's got something to hide. Now, you and Ray are in the same company. So I hope Ray hears this. He can call me up anytime this weekend except because I got to go somewhere in the bus, except it's not good to call me tomorrow until after 2 o'clock or anytime Sunday. I just don't want this, we called you and you didn't answer, this excuse. I think they're both backing down. Ken's a big talker, well, let's get it on. So I hope Ray's listening to this. Because if he backs down, I'm going to make it an issue in the other talk shows. That's all I got to say, Bob.
Okay, Mark. Okay, we're going to break for the halftime, and then we're going to come back to Drive-Through Jack.
You've got a job to do. Having the right equipment for the job is critical, and East West Rental has the exact tools you need. Get it done faster with the right stuff, whether it's landscaping tools, concrete tools, lifts, trucks, lights, generators, trench boxes, welders, tents, tables, and chairs. They're here to help you tackle any project you're working on, big or small. Open Monday to Saturday, 7 to 5, closed Sundays. Find what you're looking for at East West Rental Center in Upper Tumon or call 646-1463.
Half a day. I'm Will Castro and I'm running for Congress. This general election, I humbly ask for your vote in order that I may continue to build bridges and find solutions so that generations now and generations to come may live here and raise a family of their own, one day on a better Guam. If given the opportunity to serve you in Congress, you can count on me to honor and represent you well. Guahu si William Castro, Malalagudzut po Congreso, Zenhua Preba, Estina Mensahi, Bob Pelkey, Treasurer.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumon. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3. Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
So here we are at Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky. We are heading down the home stretch at Tall Tales. And today, the home stretch takes us through the drive-through at McDonald's, where we are going to interview drive-through Jack as he orders his fish witch for tonight's supper. So tell us about it, drive-through Jack.
Well, 2 out of 3 ain't bad there, as the song goes. And so, yes, I'm heading home. Yes, it's Fish Friday, and unfortunately, I'm not at the drive-thru. So, yeah, I just heard that's Pabst Martinez that was before me, right?
That's Martinez, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he has a cool name. He's named after a beer, and so I kind of.
He has an even better last name.
Yeah. Jose thinks it's a pretty cool name too, right, Jose?
I concur.
Yeah.
So, anyways, yeah, I was listening and I read that article, and Tina Moon Barnes' response about Marbury versus Madison, and I have a sneaky feeling that she doesn't know the difference between Marbury versus Madison and Tyson versus Douglas. And she probably thinks they came out the same results. It's Friday, heading home, and I just wanted to call and remind people to vote, get out of there and vote, and please dedicate one of your votes to a writer named Rhino, R-I-N-O, and I think one of them is running for Congress, or maybe 2 of them. No, just one of them is running for Congress. But Will Castro, what can you say? I used to date a school teacher way back in the day, and we used to have these, Post-its, and we put it all over, to remind each other, and, we had different work schedules, and she would always correct my Post-its. I spell love L-U-V, and she would cross it out, and no, it's L-O-V-E. And when Will first ran for senator, I had a sneaky suspicion because we had like 4,000 registered teachers here. I thought just out of habit that they would see his name and they would add the extra L in there. And
they'd see his name, and they'd see his name, Jack, and they'd say, "I'm not even going to vote for that guy who doesn't know how to spell his first name." And then
exactly.
And then they went down ballot, and they said, "I'm not going to vote for this lady who doesn't even know what her last name is."
Yeah. So I thought there would be a lot of spoiled ballots just out of habit, making the correction there. But yeah, I think there was like a 100 or a couple of hundred spoiled ballots that year. But anyways, I was surprised that he was running. I made a suggestion that maybe St. Nicholas should just change his party. But I guess the local Republicans here had Will in mind to run in that slot. So yeah, here we are. And, I'm not going to...
Actually, Will was the minority leader of the Republicans, and then there was a coup, and all of a sudden, Will was replaced by someone whose name shall never pass our lips, and Will announced that he was running for Washington. So it kind of looked like they shuck-scanned Will, and as a kind of a defense mechanism, he said, well, yeah, I'm not going to be minority. I'm running for Washington.
Running to or running, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get to that anyways. But he's done more for the CNMI. I mean, he was the one that initiated that driver's license stuff that'd be reciprocal, right, between Guam and the CNMI. I think that's the only one I remember about him. That he made the driver's license reciprocal.
Well, I can't tell you how happy that makes me.
Well, anyways, I heard you earlier. And I got this on my feed that Michael St. Nicholas is now in the ICU unit at
You didn't tune in at the beginning of the program, Jack.
Yeah, I just finished work.
How are you going to be able to pass the test?
That's why I was calling, just to get the correct information.
Had you tuned in at the beginning of the program, you would have found out that you have a new feature of Tall Tales has been named the Drive-Through Jack count.
Okay.
And it goes like this. This is the 226th day of Guam held hostage by Governor Leon Guerrero. Stay tuned tomorrow for another Drive-Through Jack report on the count-up.
Yeah, don't forget the most important ones: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. She has put a lid on that, and the lid comes from the Joe Biden.
You got a feature named after you, Jack. Don't push your luck.
Yeah. Well, anyways, I just want to get.
And then, as far as San Nicolas is concerned, Jack, it was a classic. We all know that if a dog bites a man, it's not news. But if a man bites a dog, it is news. So we had a guy who busted out of quarantine way back in the very beginning, a guy named Matt Murphy.
Murphy.
Murphy. He figured out how to bust out of quarantine. And we hear about people busting out of jail, escaping from that. That's not unusual, right? But here we had a guy who busted into quarantine. Mike San Nicolas, although he wasn't Wuhan virus positive, he pulled some strings with his sister-in-law to get admitted to the isolation facility at the Bayview Hotel. Probably disappointed that it wasn't located on the 19th floor. But anyhow, he busted in to the isolation facility. So that's the classic case of the man biting the dog.
Well, but I hear he's in the hospital now.
What did I just tell you?
You said he was at Bayview.
Yeah. So who are you going to believe? Some scurrilous rumor?
Oh wait, is he giving us breaking news?
Yeah.
That's what I got on my feed. I just got it like a couple of hours ago that he was up at the GMH.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Jack, we'll see you on Monday. We're coming to the end.
All right, Bob.
We're coming to the beginning of that period that Jose and I always abhor. It's called the weekend, but we'll be back on Monday. See you then.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Battling for votes in the Sunshine State. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Both of the presidential candidates campaigning in Florida yesterday. In Tampa, President Trump touting the report from the Commerce Department showing the country's output of goods and services grew at more than 33% in the third quarter.
This explosive economic growth is 4 times greater than what the experts expected. They expected a number that would be like 7%, 8%.
Joe Biden also held an event in Tampa touting the green economy.
Combating climate change means jobs. We can unleash American ingenuity in manufacturing and build a stronger and more climate-resistant nation, creating millions of new high-paying jobs.
But Mr. Biden's Tampa appearance was cut short by a sudden downpour. The polls suggest a virtual dead heat in Florida. Both men have campaign events in Wisconsin and Minnesota today. Minnesota's governor has issued an order limiting